Welcome back. Now let's revise part 2 of the chapter Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. So we'll quickly begin because I have already explained from page number 17 to page number 20 in part 1. So if you haven't watched it, you can go back and revise the beginning of the chapter and then come to this. So this explanation is from page number 20 to 23. So in part 1, what we've talked about the red letter day, the ceremony, the events in the ceremony, and how he remembers the events of history and speaks about the sacrifices. Now, after this, I am taking the rest of the headings of the chapter now. So, now we'll talk about effects and impact of apartheid on page number 20. Now, apartheid had created a deep and lasting wound in his country and his people. So, according to him, it will take many years, if not generations, to recover from the profound hurt, to bring back lives on the right track again. So, he says that because it had taken many years, so लोगों के ऊपर उसका बहुत असर हुआ है. So, it will take many years, not if generations, to recover from that. So, but along with this unfavorable impact, there was one positive unintended effect that was not thought or planned for. Now, this is an important question here. So, this was an impact on the mentality of the people. So, they were tortured, they were harassed, but there was one positive effect also. So this positive effect was unintended, intentionally nahi hua tha, because whites, they never wanted such a thing to happen. So what was that? Years of harsh and inhuman treatment, oppression, brutality, with denying of basic rights had produced men of extraordinary courage, wisdom, and generosity. So because of इनह्यूमन ट्रीटमेंट ब्रुटैलिटी, इतनी ज़्यादा harassment और torture की वजह से लोग जो है they started rebelling. So extraordinary courage लोगों में आ गया. So such people, such great people, they became, or they came out, and they voiced and they stood against this inhuman practice. So he says that this was the positive unintended effect that happened. So there were now petty people like Oliver Tambos, the Walter Sislus, the Chief Lutless, the Yusuf Dadus, and the Bram Fishers and Robert Supkos of our time. So these all, they are the prominent names in the struggle against apartheid. So he says many people like these great people, they came forward and they stood against the policy of apartheid, and this he calls it as a positive effect, although it was unintended. So it is often said that from adversity rises great. So this is what Mandela means when he says that perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. So he wants to say that कभी कभी लोगों को अपने अंदर की करेज और ब्रेवरी तभी पता लगती है जब कोई बुरा वक्त आता है. So perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. Then another important thing that he talks about is the greatest wealth of the country. He says that though his country is rich in minerals and gems that lie beneath its soil, but he has always known that its greatest wealth is its people. So he calls the people of his country as its greatest wealth. He calls that they are far more precious and truer than the purest diamonds. So this also sometimes comes as a question. Next, meaning of courage for him. This is an important question on page number 21. So what does courage mean to Mandela? Mandela learned the meaning of courage from his comrades. Comrade means uske jo sathi hai, both men and women, who were always ready to risk their lives for an idea. So उसके साथ आसपास के जो लोग थे, they were always ready to risk their life for an idea. So he had seen men standing up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing strength and resilience, determination and resolve. So they were always determined, always they were resolved, and they never stepped back, that no one could imagine. So they had such determination, such courage that no one could ever imagine. So it defies the imagination. People, they cannot even imagine how bravely they accepted the torture and they stood against that. So he learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. So he learned that courage is actually not the absence of fear, but it is victory over that fear. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. So courageous people, they can withstand all kind of atrocities. So you need to learn this. This is an important question. Now next is love and hate. So which does he think is natural, to love or to hate? Now, since no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion, Nelson Mandela believed that people must learn to hate. And if they learn to hate, then they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Now, Nelson Mandela, he believed कि जब कोई जन्म लेता है तो nobody hates anyone because of the color of the skin, religion, caste or creed. So इसलिए उसका मानना है कि लोग जो है जैसे बड़े होते हैं so वो नफरत करना सीखते हैं. So they learn to hate. They must learn to hate. So that is why he says कि अगर वो नफरत करना सीख सकते हैं तो वो प्यार करना भी सीख सकते हैं because that is a more natural emotion. So love, it comes more naturally to human heart than its opposite. So according to him, man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. So उसके according जो goodness है, अच्छाई है, वो हर एक के अंदर में है. तो वो छिप सकती है लेकिन वो कभी भी खत्म नहीं हो सकती. And this goodness and compassion, he says that they are inherent attributes of man. वो सबके पास है. These can be shadowed or hidden, but can never extinguish or be absent. So, this is the explanation of this expression, and it is important. He had experienced this in the prison when he and his comrades they were pushed to their limits. So, जब वो prison में था और बहुत ही torture सहन हो कर रहा था, so at that time he experienced this glimmer in the eyes of the God. Oh, sorry, eyes of the God there. So he was pushed to their limits and they were tortured to unimaginable extent beyond one's bearing capacity. So there he saw a glimmer of humanity in the eyes of one of the white guards. Maybe just for a second he saw that humanity, the glimmer of humanity in the eyes. Maybe he just saw it just for a second out of compassion or it was sympathy of the God, but he says that it was enough for him to give him hope, to give him conviction to keep on going. So he says that there's humanity, there's love, there's compassion. It is an inherent quality of every human being. So it can be hidden, but you cannot you cannot have this feeling or these emotions absent in the heart of a person. There has to be some compassion, some you can say sympathy for others. Then he talks about twin obligations. So obligation is duty, commitment, or responsibility. So, what were these obligations that he talks about? So, according to Mandela, every man has twin obligations. The first one, it is the obligation to his family, to his parents, to his children, to his wife. And the second obligation, it is to his people, to his community, and to his country. Now, in a civil and humane society, all are able to fulfill these obligations according to their capabilities. So he says, in a civil and humane society means जहाँ पे जिस देश में सब कुछ ठीक है, all laws they are justified. So वहाँ पे one will be able to fulfill all these obligations. All these obligations means both the obligations towards his family and towards the community and the country according to their own capabilities. But this was not possible in South Africa. So, but it means fulfilling the twin obligations. It was different in South Africa. Now, what was different there? In South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of Mandela's birth and color to fulfill both these obligations. So, whites, they could fulfill all these obligations, but not the black skinned peoples. Why? Because in South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. So, man of color means black skinned people if they attempted to live as a human being. That means if they demanded their rights. So they were punished, they were isolated, they were taken away from their family. So there, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart. What kind of life? A twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. So what kind of life such people they had to live? A twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. What it means now? Twilight, it means half light, semi darkness. That such people who wanted to do their duty for their people, So they had to live a secret life, a life in semi darkness, because they have to hide themselves to do something for their people. So this phrase, it means half secret life. So the life that is lived in fading light, in semi darkness, a secret life of rebellion. So they had to hide themselves to work for their people. They have to be away from their family. They have to be at some maybe secret place, so that the government that was against black skinned people should not come to know what they were doing or where they were hiding. Now, when did Mandela realize that he was not able to fulfill his obligations towards his family? Now, Mandela could not see his people suffer and be deprived of their basic rights. So, in an attempt to serve his people, he found that he was prevented from fulfilling his obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. So, if or when Mandela wanted to serve his people, he realized that while he wanted to serve his people, he was not able to fulfill his obligations towards his family because he had to hide himself. He had to go away. He had to be at some secret place to do all that. Then born free. On page number 22, then he talks about freedom. Everyone is born free, so was Nelson. As a child, he enjoyed a free life, like every other child. He was free to run in the fields near his mother's hut, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through his village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow moving bulls. As long as he obeyed his father and abided by the customs of his tribe, he was not troubled by the laws of man or God. So, as a child, he was not aware that he was not free in complete sense. So, as a child, he was enjoying a free life, a free, playful life. He used to run in the fields, then he used to swim in the clear stream, and he used to even ride on the backs of the bull. So, he enjoyed like every other child. So, ये जो है फ्रीडम वो तब तक enjoy करता रहा जब तक वो अपने फादर की बात मानता रहा और अपने ट्राइब्स के रूल्स और रेगुलेशन जो है उसको फॉलो करता रहा. सो till he was doing all this, he was not at all troubled by anyone, not even by the government. So as a child उसे ये नहीं पता था कि वो actually free नहीं है, but जैसे जैसे वो बड़ा होता गया तो उसके सामने वो सच्चाई आती गई. So freedom was an illusion. So as he grew up, he realized that वो freedom वो जो सोच रहा था कि वो free है, actually it is an illusion. So as Mandela grew up, he reached his boyhood, and that time he realized that his freedom had already been taken away from him. It was then that he began to hunger for it. So तब उसे लगने लगा कि नहीं उसे freedom चाहिए. सो एज अ स्टूडेंट उसके लिए फ्रीडम का क्या मतलब था, देन एज अ यंग मैन उसके लिए फ्रीडम का क्या मतलब था. एज अ स्टूडेंट ही वॉन्टेड फ्रीडम फॉर हिमसेल्फ, द ट्रांसिटरी फ्रीडम्स ऑफ बीइंग एबल टू स्टे आउट एट नाइट, रीड व्हाट ही प्लीज्ड एंड टू गो वेयर ही चोज. सो एक स्टूडेंट की जैसे ज़रूरतें होती हैं और फ्रीडम जो स्टूडेंट को चाहिए अपनी मन की करने की. सो एट दैट टाइम ही वांटेड दैट काइंड ऑफ फ्रीडम, बट एज अ यंग मैन इन जोहान्सबर्ग ही yearned फॉर द बेसिक एंड ऑनरेबल फ्रीडम्स. फिर लगने लगा कि उसे फ्रीडम जो है किसी और सेंस में चाहिए. सो दैट फ्रीडम इज टू अचीव हिज पोटेंशियल, टू अर्न हिज कीप, फॉर मैरिंग एंड हैविंग अ फैमिली. So to achieve his potential means opportunities uske potential ke according, a job to earn his living, to marry and to have a family. So the freedom that is not obstructed in a lawful life. So उसे वो सारी freedom चाहिए थी जो कि वो enjoy कर सकता है even while living a lawful life. So freedom curtailed, but then he realized that his freedom it had been curtailed. When and why did Mandela join ANC, African National Congress? So as a young man, Mandela soon realized that not only was he not free, but his brothers and sisters they were also not free. So जल्दी ही Mandela को एहसास हो जाता है that उसकी तरह के लोग, that means black skinned people, his brothers and sisters, they were not free. Freedom for everyone who looked like him was curtailed. So all black people they were forced to live a restricted life, a life bound by chains of oppression. So soon he realized all this. So that is when he joined the African National Congress, and that was when the hunger for his own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of his people. So उस time पे जब उसे ये रियलाइजेशन हुई तो उसने अफ्रीकन नेशनल कांग्रेस ज्वाइन की एंड एट दैट टाइम उसकी खुद के लिए जो फ्रीडम की चाहत थी वो उसकी चाहत एक बड़ी चाहत में बदल गई। वो बड़ी चाहत अपने जैसे सभी लोगों के लिए फ्रीडम की चाहत। Now, how did he become a criminal? Now, page number 23. So, his desire for the freedom of his people to live their lives with dignity and self respect gave a new meaning to his life. It filled him with enthusiasm, that is, animated his life. It gave a goal, a aim to his life. Animated his life, filled him with enthusiasm, so with energy. So, he wanted to work for them now. This urge transformed a frightened young man into a bold one that drove a law abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family loving husband into a man without a home, that forced a life loving man to live like a monk. So again the explanation of this is important. So he says कि ये जो urge है, ये जो चाहत है उसके अंदर, उसने एक frightened young man को एक bold आदमी बना दिया. So a law abiding attorney because he had done law, he was a lawyer. So एक lawyer को जो law abiding lawyer था, जो सारे rules regulations and laws को मानता था, एक criminal में बदल दिया. So it turned a family loving husband into a man without a home and forced him to live a life like a monk. So Mandela's desire to fight for the rights of his people, to enable them to live with dignity, converted him into a bold man. Being an attorney, he knew about his rights and raised a voice against the atrocities happening around. Since he spoke against the oppressive laws of the white rulers, he was labeled as a criminal. So इसलिए इस तरह वो criminal बन गया. Now freedom is indivisible. Mandela regarded that freedom was indivisible. One could not be free if the other was in shackles of restriction. So Mandela के according freedom जो है वो सबकी एक सांझी चीज है. So freedom cannot be divided. That means मैं free हूँ लेकिन जो मेरे साथ बैठा है that person is not free. So this is not possible. If the other person is not free, then I'm also not free. So he felt that freedom could be enjoyed only when all were free. All had the right to live with dignity. In this sense, freedom is indivisible. It cannot be availed by one and restricted for the other. So chains of oppression on all of his people were actually chains on him. So उसे ये लगता था कि अगर कोई ही उसके जैसा free नहीं है, so he is also not free. So freedom is indivisible. Oppressor and oppressed. This is again an important question. So, does Mandela think the oppressor is free? Why not? Now, according to Mandela, the oppressor himself is enslaved of his hatred, prejudice and narrow-mindedness. तो उसका मानना है कि जो oppress कर रहा है, जो दूसरों को harass कर रहा है, जो दूसरों को torture कर रहा है, वो actually खुद ही एक slave है. Hatred का, prejudice का और narrow-mindedness का. So the oppressed, they suffers at the hands of oppressor. They are suppressed and basic human rights are denied to them, but the oppressor himself suffers too. So वो कहता है कि जो oppressed है, जिनके ऊपर torture हो रहा है, वो तो suffer कर ही रहे हैं. Basic human rights उनको नहीं मिल रही हैं, but जो oppressor है वो भी अंदर ही अंदर सफ़र करता है. The oppressor is troubled and burdened with enmity and bias. So उसके अंदर वो hatred, वो jealousy जो है वो उसको ही अंदर से अंदर खा रही होती है. So both the oppressed and the oppressor alike, they are robbed of their humanity. So that's all for this. This is the complete explanation of the chapter. Important questions I have discussed side by side, but few questions that are left, I'll be making a worksheet and I'll be uploading it. So check this playlist to save your time. All the important topics are discussed, analytical paragraphs or letters are here, revision worksheets are there, and the chapters are also here. So do subscribe to my channel and revise the worksheets that I upload. Happy preparation.